He woke before the sun. Every day the land decided his clock. Not the sky-dry wind moved across the fields and touched his face like an old habit. He did not rush. There was no one waiting for him inside the house. No voice, no footsteps, no warm sound of life, just wood walls, dust light, and the smell of soil that followed him everywhere, though. Farm was not big, but it was heavy. With memory, his father worked this land, his grandfather worked it before. Him hands passed down knowledge without writing how to. Read the soil, how to feel rain before it arrived. How to accept loss without words. People in the nearby town knew him as the quiet farmer. He spoke when needed and stopped when the work was done. They did not know much else. He liked it that way. Stories made people curious, and curiosity brought questions. Questions always found the past. He did not want the past touch. Land had been cruel in recent years. Rain came late or not. At all crops struggled animals. Aged some mornings he stood still and wondered how long the land would allow him to stain in anger, but in honest thought he had already lost much. If the land left him too, he did not know who he would be. He once imagined a different life, that life existed only in quiet moments. Now it had laughter. It had a small table with extra plates. It had hope that stayed through the night. That life ended long ago. It ended without drama, without shouting, just absence that grew larger with time. He did not blame anyone. Blame required energy. He spent his energy on work, on fixing fences, on walking the edge of the field, in listening to the sound of boots against earthbat. Sound reminded him he was still here. The mornings were his favorite, not because they were joyful, because they were honest. No one expected him to be anything before sunrise. He could exist without explanation. One morning, while repairing a broken post near the far fence, he felt a presence, not a sound, not a voice, just a shift in the air. He looked up slowly. She stood across the fence line, still watching. She did not wave. She did not speak. Her posture was calm, but not weak. Her eyes held something older than curiosity. He had seen many looks in his life. This one did not ask for anything. It waited. He straightened his back, wiped dirt from his hands against his pants. He nodded once, a habit of respect. She nodded back. They stood like that for a long moment, moved grass between them. The fence separated more than land. She turned and walked away without a word. Her steps were steady, not hurried, not afraid. He watched until she disappeared beyond the trees. Then he returned to the post, but the rhythm of his work had changed. His hands slowed, his thoughts wandered. He told himself it meant nothing. People passed through land all the time. Hunters, travelers, lost souls, but something in her presence stayed, not in his mind, in his chest. Stays past work continued. The land demanded attention, he answered. Then she returned, this time closer to the house, standing near the dirt road that led to town. He saw her from a distance, the same calm stance, the same waiting eyes. He walked toward her, not out of fernat, out of desire, of something like responsibility. She spoke first. Her voice was low and steady. She greeted him simply, no extra words. He responded the same way, short, respectful. She told him she came from the Apache community nearby. She did not explain further. She did not need to. The land already carried that truth, she said. She had been watching the farm for some time. In secret, in observation, she spoke of the soil, of how the land still listened. Her words surprised him. Most people talked about weather or money. She talked about the ground as if it were alive. He listened more than he spoke. That had always been his way. She said she would return, then she left again after that. Her visits became part of the days, not every day, not predictable, but steady enough to be noticed sometimes. She stood by the fence, sometimes near the tree, sometimes closer than before, always respectful, never crossing without permission. They spoke more each time about the land, about seasons. It's about silence. She never asked personal questions. Noticed that she shared small parts of her own life instead, about her community, about elders, about responsibility. He learned that her strength was not loud. It was rooted like an old tree that did not bend easily. The town noticed her ties, followed her when she walked the road. Whispers started, as they always did. He did not ask her about Ashia, did not mention it. One evening after she left, he sat alone on the porch. The sky was red and tired. He realized something uncomfortable. He looked forward to her visits. The thought unsettled him not because of romance, but because he had closed that part of himself long ago. He told himself again that it meant nothing. Connection did not always lead to pain, but it always carried risks still. When she came again, he felt the day shift as if time slowed just enough to notice itself. She asked him questions now about the land, history, about his family. He answered carefully, choosing truth. Without depth, she listened without pushing. There was a shared understanding between them. Some things did not need to be spoken yet. One afternoon, she stayed longer than usual. They sat on opposite sides of the fence. The sun moved slowly above them. She spoke of loss, not specific, but real. He felt Ith did not interrupt. He let silence do the work. When she finished, she looked at him, not searching, just present. That look stayed with him long after she left. That night, sleep came late. His mind replayed small moments, her voice, her stillness, the way she looked at the land as if it remembered her. He did not know that this quiet beginning was the edge of something that would change his life. Only knew that the farm no longer felt as empty as it once had, and that was enough to disturb the peace he had built around his solitude. The land rested under the stars, and somewhere between old fences and unspoken thoughts, a story had begun slowly. Without force, without warning, days turned into weeks, and her visits became a quiet rhythm in his life. He noticed the way she moved through the land, her steps careful, yet confident, like someone who belonged somewhere else, but respected this space she entered. One afternoon, she came closer than ever, standing at the edge of the orchard. She did not speak at first, only observed. He felt his chest tightened. Something was different. She turned to him and asked a question so unexpected it made the work in his hand stop. She asked if he could help her have a child, not in a casual way, not as a joke. Her eyes held seriousness and an unspoken trust. He froze. The tools in his hands felt heavy. The wind moved through the orchard, and he hardly noticed the world pause. The thought seemed impossible. He had lived alone for years. He had closed the door on family and the world beyond these fields. The past had taken everything he thought he would need now. Here she was, asking for something that made him confront everything he had tried to bury. He could not speak. Words seemed to have small, too fragile. She waited, not forcing, not demanding, just waiting with calm that made his heart race. Silence stretched longer than any conversation he had had in months. Finally he spoke. His voice lit, carried the weight of his doubt in his own disbelief. He asked why would she trust him with this request? Her answer was simple. She said that she had watched him and knew he understood responsibility, that he cared for the land, and that it mattered to him to protect what was fragile. She said she had hoped that he could help her without needing anything in return. The words struck him harder than he expected. They made him remember the life he had imagined once, the small table, extra plates, hope in the night. It all returned, but it was now tangled with fear and uncertainty. He needed time. He told her he would think. She nodded and left. The air seemed heavier after she walked away. For days he could not focus on the land, the fences, the soil, the crops. His mind returned to her question, her trust, the way she believed in something he had thought he lost forever. He walked alone by the orchard at night. The wind whispered through the tree. Stars above were distant but clear. He asked himself if he could do it, if he could carry the responsibility without failing. No one had ever asked him for this kind of trust. It was more than land or animals. It was life itself. She returned after several days. She waited at the fence line, looking at him without speaking. He felt shame for his hesitation, but he also felt a strange pull, lay connection that was not romantic, not yet anyway, something older and deeper. They began meeting more often, sitting by the fence, talking about life that had nothing to do with the world outside, about seasons, about patience, about understanding pain without words. He shared fragments of his own past, small moments, lessons from his father's stories of drought and harvest. She listened with intensity and did not interrupt. She spoke of her community, of elders who guided not with words but with presence, of children who carried hope in their laughter. He began to see her courage, not loud or demanding, but steady and rooted, like the old oak at the edge of his land. One evening she said something that changed the rhythm of their visits. She said that having a child mattered to her beyond herself. It was about life continuing, about carrying memory and love forward. He felt the weight of her words. It touched a place inside him he thought was long gone. He realized that helping her would not just change her life, it would change his too. But he also feared failure. He feared judgment from the town. He feared the burden of expectation. For the first time, he felt vulnerable in a way that was not about weakness, it was about trust and truth. He spent nights thinking, walking among the fields, watching the moonlight move over soil and fancy. Imagined the future in ways he had never allowed himself to imagine. The question she asked became a presence, quiet but unrelenting. It followed him. Like shadow, he remembered the empty house, the long silences, the nights when hope felt like a stranger. And then he realized that he had always longed for something beyond survival, something beyond simple existence. He had longed for purpose. Perhaps this was it. When he met her again, he did not hesitate as much. He spoke carefully. He said that he would help her, that he would do what he could to respect her wishes and protect what they were creating together. She smiled softly, not a broad smile, but a quiet acknowledgement. She said thank you, and left without fanfare. After she walked away, he felt a strange mix of fear and piss. The Elan seemed heavier but also alive in a new way. He understood that this choice would shape him, that it would not be easy, but that it was necessary. The days that followed were different. He felt responsibility not just for crops and fences, but for something sacred. Woman continued to visit, sometimes just to talk, sometimes just to watch the land they built. Trust, slowly, not through words but through presence. He noticed the way she respected boundaries, the way she carried herself with dignity, the way she believed in him without demanding. The community remained distant. He did not ask about their opinion. It did not matter. Yet the request had been made. The choice had been accepted, and the world shifted quietly on its axis. Worked harder than before, but not out of fear, out of understanding them. Land and life had value beyond the simple routine. Evenings became moments of reflection. He thought about the child to come about, what it meant to nurture something beyond oneself. He did not imagine joy yet. Not fully, but he imagined possibility, and in that quiet possibility, he felt life stir in ways he had thought impossible. Land still listened, the wind still moved, and something new had begun. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of their meetings deepened. Fence line became a quiet place of understanding and reflection. They did not need to speak every time. Silence carried meaning. Notice small details about Hertha, where her fingers moved when touching the soil. Careful way she stepped around rocks and roots, the tilt of her head when she listened. He began sharing more, not about the past and full, but about simple truths of work and life, about seasons and weather, about failures he had endured and the lessons he had carried forward. She listened without interruption. Her presence alone seemed to honor what he said. They started walking the edges of the farm together, following the path along the river, sometimes among the orchard, her steps light yet deliberate, his careful yet aware. One afternoon she spoke differently, her voice softer than usual. She asked him how he felt about what they were about to do. He paused. He had thought about it endlessly. The weight of responsibility pressed on him. He admitted that he feared failing her, that he feared bringing harm or disappointment. She looked at him steadily, her eyes calm and unwavering. She said that life was never without risk, that mistakes could teach more than perfection, that courage sometimes meant carrying hope without knowing the outcome. He listened and felt a strange relief. Her words settled some of the tension he had carried, not all, but enough to take the next step. Days were spent preparing quietly. He repaired fences, cleared land, tended animals. All tasks felt different now, each one carrying intention beyond survival, each one carrying preparation for what was to come. She helped too. She did not impose herself. She moved through the land like a gentle force, guiding him at times without speaking, correcting small mistakes with subtle gestures. The townspeople noticed her presence more often. Whispers began, questions arose. He did not care. The choice had been made. Belonged to them, not to gossip or judgment. One evening after work, he sat on the porch. She joined him. They did not speak at first. The silence was companionable. She finally said that having a child was not only about life, it was about continuity, about carrying memory and love forward, about creating something that mattered beyond themselves. He felt the weight of her words in his chest, something he had not felt in years, a pull toward meaning beyond routine. He told her about his father, about lessons Learn from soil and seasons about how life demanded patience and respect. She listened with quiet reverence. The sun fell below the horizon shadows. Stretched across fields, they watched together. The quiet, shared, felt sacred weeks turned into months. Relationship between them grew, rooted not in romance, not yet, but in trust and shared understanding. Began to speak more openly about her community, about elders and traditions, about responsibilities that shaped her every decision. He shared small stories of past hardships, the droughts, the losses, the nights when hope seemed absent. She did not pity him. She acknowledged and respected the endurance it had taken. One afternoon, she asked to walk further into the fields. He agreed. They moved slowly among rows of crops and trees. She paused, often touching leaves, feeling soil, examining the land. She spoke of her hope for the child, not in terms of names or plans, but in life and health and belonging and identity. He listened and realized he was becoming part of something larger, something beyond himself and the land. He noticed how people in town watched them, curious or suspicious. He did not respond. Their concern did not matter. The woman shared moments of her own past loss, enjoyed challenges and courage. She spoke with honesty and restraint. He learned that her strength came from rooted patience, quiet power that did not demand recognition. Was a presence that carried weight without force. They worked together, preparing for the coming months. Not everything could be controlled, but every action was intentionally. Repaired fences, cleared weeds, prepared spaces where the child could grow safely. She gathered herbs, maintained small routines, shared quiet wisdom that made life feel fuller. One evening, he realized he could not remember the last time he had felt fear alone. Every thought now carried purpose and responsibility. The bond between them strengthened in small acts, shared meals, careful guidance, quiet moments. At dusk, they began to speak about the future, not in detail but in possibility, the life that might come and the care it would require. He felt the land differently. The soil seemed to hum with potential. The wind whispered not only through trees but through hope. She noticed his change to not in words, in presence, in the way he carried himself with both caution and courage. They were learning from each other, teaching each other about life, patience and respect, trust and endurance. At night, he walked among the fields, alone, looking at the stars, thinking of the life they were beginning to build together. He understood that helping her was not a task, it was transformation. It was no longer just a farmer maintaining the land. He was part of a story that included hope and new life. Days passed. Slowly they continued their work. They continued to learn. The world outside remained unaware, but the world within the farm had shifted. The fence that once separated them had become a place of connection. Land no longer felt empty. Each visit brought understanding and responsibility. He realized that life could grow even in unexpected places, even after years of solitude, even after loss and hardship. They were preparing not just for a child, but for the shared journey of care and trust. The world outside could wait, the land the work. And the quiet moments carried them forward, each day, a small step toward life that would forever change the rhythm of their existence. Days grew warmer, and the land responded to care and attention. Crops began to stretch toward the sun. The earth seemed softer under their hands. The woman returned often, each visit longer than the last, sometimes just sitting quietly, sometimes walking the edges of the farm, sometimes helping with small tasks. He noticed how her presence changed the rhythm of work. Simple tasks became shared actions. The routine of farming felt lighter and yet heavier with responsibility. The child she carried was unspoken in daily words, but it lingered in every gesture, every glance, every careful step they took together. Rumors began to spread in town. People noticed the woman at the farm. Some whispered questions, some raised eyebrows. He ignored them. He had made a choice. Responsibility that belonged to them. Alanche spoke sometimes about the expectations she carried from her community, about the traditions she wanted to honor, about the hope she held for the child. He listened, not with judgment, but with understanding. The weight of her words rested on him, as they would on any man who truly cared. One afternoon they walked further than usual. River had risen slightly. Water moved slowly through reeds and rocks. Birds called above. Shay asked him if he feared the world outside the farm. He admitted he did, but he said that responsibility required courage, that Life demanded facing fear even when it was uncomfortable. She nodded. She understood without needing more explanation. They returned slowly. Hands brushed, occasionally small acknowledgments of presence. Not romance, not urgency, but connection. The farm became a place of preparation rooms, clean spaces, arranged small tools and supplies, organized all for a life that would soon arrive. The woman taught him small rituals, quiet ways to honor health and life's simple practices that felt ancient yet real. He absorbed each lesson, carried it in the way he moved, in the way he touched soil, in the way he watched the sky. Evenings where the hardest thoughts turned inward, fears and hopes tangled together. He worried about her health, about the future, their ability to protect what they were creating. She sensed his concern without needing words. She reassured him with presence, calm, steady and rooted. Neighbors watched from a distance, some with curiosity, some with judgments, some with sympathy. He did not care. They had no place in the decisions being made. Only respect and understanding mattered. One night, a storm rolled in, thunder echoed across fields, wind tore at trees. He worried for her, for the child, for the land. She arrived at the farm despite the storm water dripping from hair and clothes. Eyes steady and calm, they worked together through the rain, securing fence, moving animals, protecting the small orchard. When the storm passed, they stood among the damaged crops and debris, silent, breathing together. He realized in that moment that life would always carry risk, that courage was not about safety, but about presence, commitment, love for something greater than oneself. Months continued. She grew stronger, yet more careful. He grew quieter, yet more aware. They spoke more openly now about the future, about life beyond the farm, about the child who would come here. Admitted to furnish shame, but careful acknowledgement. She listened and offered quiet wisdom, advice, without command, presence, without demand. Land seemed to hum with their effort. The soil responded to the care and attention. The farm no longer felt empty or abandoned. Neighbors began to notice the changes, crops, healthier animals tended with skill. The farmer no longer isolated. The woman became part of the daily rhythm. Some approached cautiously, seeking understanding. Others whispered doubts. He ignored them. All the choice was theirs. She spoke of her elders, of traditions, of responsibilities that shaped her life. He spoke of his father, of lessons learned through hardship and patience. They built a foundation not visible to the world outside, but strong, silence, steady. One evening she asked him what he feared most. He answered truthfully that he might fail, that he might not be enough, that the child might be harmed. She nodded, acknowledged the fear, then reminded him that courage meant acting despite fear, that responsibility carried its own strength. He understood, not fully at first, but in pieces that grew with time. They worked each day, preparing for the child, arranging spaces, clearing land, maintaining routines, teaching patience. The world outside could wait. It was irrelevant to the quiet transformation taking place. He began to see her differently. Now, not only as a visitor, but as someone who shared purpose and vision. She respected boundaries. Her care was present without demanding. Her trust was a gift he could not take lightly. They continued to walk the farm together, share silence, share labor, share moments of understanding. And in these small actions, the future began to feel real, not abstract, not distant, but close, concrete. Keisu's child to come was a quiet presence, growing in anticipation, shaping the rhythm of their days, influencing the care with which they moved through life. They learned to trust each other, not in words, but in actions, in presence, in steady care. Each day, they faced challenges, weather, animals, uncertainty, and each day they rose to meet them together. He felt himself changing, not only in action, but in thought and purpose and understanding of what life could. Beatty Farm became more than land. It became a space of life, of hope, of new beginnings. Through it all, they understood that responsibility was a path, not a destination, that trust and care required patience, that courage was not loud, but steady. The child was not yet born, but already they were preparing already. They were learning already. They were connected in. The world outside remained distant, irrelevant, for what they shared on this land would shape everything that followed. The days grew quieter and heavier at the same time the child was near. The anticipation shaped every action, every thought, every breath. Woman moved carefully across the farm. He followed her steps, ready for anything. Every moment felt urgent and sacred. She rested. Often they spoke little, but each glance and gesture carried understanding. The presence of the child felt stronger than words. The farm had changed, the soil richer from care. The animals calmed the fences. Sturdy neighbors whispered, still some approving, some curious, some doubtful. He did not notice the world outside was irrelevant. She shared her rituals with him, simple, quiet acts of care for life and health, for hope and strength. He learned from her, absorb each lesson slowly, intentionally. One night the labor began. The woman called for him. He moved quickly but calmly, every step measured, every thought present. They prepared, the space cleaned, the room arranged what they would need. The land seemed to hold its breath. He stayed by her side, calm and steady, even as the wind howled outside. Thunder rumbled in the distance. She did not cry, she did not complain. She endured each contraction with strength he had never seen. He held her hand, guided her breathing, provided quiet reassurance, every movement deliberate and careful. As time stretched, pain and endurance became one. He felt awe, mixture of fear and respect. He understood fully now what trust truly meant. She whispered small words, fragments of hope and encouragement. He listened, repeated them, silently carried them in his own heart. Night grew darker, rain fell softly, the farm illuminated only by lantern shadows moving against walls. Finally the moment arrived. A new life. He held the child, small, warm, fragile, breathing and alive. The woman rested, yet smiling, her eyes full of relief and love. He looked at them. Both felt a shift deep inside. The weight of solitude lifted. The past lost its hold. They were no longer just individuals on the land. They were a family. The child lay between them. Breath, soft and rhythmic life. Moving forward, they did not speak much. Words were unnecessary. Presence and Netha, woman, shared a look. Not acknowledging everything they had endured together, he understood that love was not always loud, not always immediate, but steady and rooted. Though days following were gentle and focused, they cared for the child together, shared responsibilities without complaint. He learned the rhythms of feeding and care. She shared stories of community and tradition. The child listened and responded, life unfolding naturally. The farm became full, not just with crops and animals, but with laughter, soft sounds of life, the presence of the new beginning. Neighbors noticed too. Some offered helps. Some watched quietly, curiosity now mingled with respect. He no longer feared judgment. He understood that responsibility carried its own reward. She rested more. They walked slowly, prepared meals together, maintained the land with corral. Actions now infused with purpose. Nights were quieter. Sat by the porch, the child sleeping nearby. The land resting under stars. He felt gratitude for her trust, for her courage, for the chance to be part of life again. He spoke of hopes for the future, not dreams beyond reach, but small, achievable moments of love and guidance. He listened, absorbed the wisdom, felt his own heart open in ways he had forgotten. Time passed, the child grew, their bond deepened. Force not dramatic, but natural and strong. Every day was a lesson, every task a step in life, every challenge an opportunity to care. The farm felt alive, soil, water, animals, and people, all moving together in harmony. The world beyond continued, but here existence was measured in presence and responsibility. They celebrated small victories, growth of crops, milestones, of the child, quiet achievements that mattered deeply. The woman shared moments of her past, lessons learned and wisdom gained. He shared his own moments of loss and understanding. Together they built a life grounded in care and trust, not without fear or hardship, but with resilience and intention. Child grew with their guidance, learning the rhythms of land and life, feeling love and presence in every step. Realized fully now that life was not only about survival, it was about nurturing, about trust, about courage. Carried quietly and steadily, though. Farm no longer felt like a burden. It was a home, a space of learning and growth, a place where life continued in many forms. They walked the land together, watched the sky, observed the animals, shared quiet moments. Furry action now had purpose. Every presence mattered. He felt the weight of history of ancestors who had cared for this land, and now of a new generation beginning. The world outside remained distant. The farm, the woman and the child formed a center of life, a quiet place of continuity, and loved the story of trust. Courage and care would continue, its day building on the last, the child growing, learning, and shaping the future, the land responding to hands that honored its hand. He knew for the first time in years that life could return, that hope could flourish, that love could grow quietly. Steadily and powerfully, the cycle of life had returned to the farm, and nothing would ever be the same. Months passed, and the child grew stronger. Each day brought small milestones and quiet celebrations. The farm was alive with soft sounds of life. Earth beneath their feet seemed fuller and richer. He watched the child carefully. Every gesture, every step, every sound. His heart expanded with a kind of understanding he had never known before. The woman taught him patience and presence, how to notice small changes, how to nurture without controlling, how to guide without demanding. They walked through the fields together, sometimes with the child in their arms, sometimes watching the sun set across the horizon. Land seemed to stretch endlessly around them. People in town began to understand that the child was part of something larger, just a secret, but a living connection between two worlds. He realized that life carried more than survival. It carried responsibility, love, hope. She spoke of her own people, of lessons passed down through generations, of respect for the earth, of the meaning of life and care. He absorbed each word, slowly carried it in his mind and body, let it shape the way he moved and worked together. They taught the child about the farm, about the soil, about the animals, about the importance of kindness and patience. The child learned quickly, watching their actions, listening to their words, feeling the presence of care in every moment. Evenings were quiet and reflective. They sat by the porch, the child resting between them, watching the stars, listening to the soft sounds of the earth. He felt gratitude and humility for the trust the woman had shown, for the life they had created together, for the chance to nurture and guide something so precious. The woman shared stories of her childhood, of elders who taught her strength and wisdom, of lessons about courage and resilience. He shared his own memories of hardships, of droughts, of lessons learned in silence and solitude. Through these exchanges they grew closer, not in words alone, but in presence and shared understanding and care. Their seasons shifted, rain came, and went. Crops flourished and were harvested. The farm thrived under careful attention. They continued to prepare for the future, not in grand plans, but in steady, deliberate acts of nurturing, teaching the child, maintaining the land, caring for each other. Child began to walk, steps unsteady, but determined. He held a hand, she held another. Together they guided each motion. The laughter of the child filled the air, a sound that had never existed on the farm before. It blended with wind and soil and animals, creating a harmony that felt natural and right. He noticed small changes in himself. Patience grew, understanding deepened. He learned to act with intention, not only for himself, but for the life he now held responsibility for. She continued to guide and teach quietly, calmly, steadily, her presence a constant source of wisdom and care. The farm itself seemed to respond, soil richer, crops healthier, animals calm and content. The rhythm of life synchronized with their care. Neighbors noticed too. Some approached with curiosity. With respect they observed a family built on trust and quiet courage. On an afternoon they walked to the orchard, the child running ahead. Laughter carried across the trees. Sunlight fell gently through leaves. They paused to watch, to breathe, to feel the life they had nurtured around them. He realized fully now that life was about connection, about presence, about responsibility, carried with love and patience. Spoke softly of hopes for the child, not in words of ambition, but in wishes for strength, kindness, and understanding. He listened, absorbed her words, felt them shape the way he approached each day. The child learned to care for animals too. Tend plants to observe and respect the land, to understand the value of quiet effort and responsibility. He taught gently, she guided patiently, and the child responded with trust and curiosity. These past nights were calm. They worked, rested, and observed the land together, every action meaningful, every moment significant. He began to feel a completeness he had never known. Solitude had been heavy and limiting. Presence carried purpose and depth. The woman smiled, often not loudly, but with warmth and calm. Pride her eyes reflected the joy and love she carried for the child. He admired her courage and steadiness, the strength she brought to the farm and family. Wisdom she shared silently and clearly. They celebrated small achievements. Child walking farther each day, speaking first words, learning simple tasks. Moments filled with presence. In Karivan, the simplest actions felt profound. Preparing meals, tending animals, maintaining the land, teaching the child. The seasons continued to shift. Rain came to nourish the soil. Sunlight warmed the fields. The farm thrived under their attention. They continued to learn from each other, teaching patience, care, and understanding, building a life that carried meaning and purpose. The child grew stronger, curious about the world, learning the rhythm of life on the farm, feeling love in every gesture. He understood now that life had returned, hope had returned, love had returned, all carried quietly, steadily, powerfully. The farm was no longer only land, it was home, sanctuary, and classroom, place of growth and nurturing, a space where life continued in many forms. They walked through the fields together, the child between them, the wind carrying soft sounds of life. He felt gratitude, humility, and joy for the trust she had placed in him, for the life they had created together, for the rhythm of daily care and presence. Woman and he shared understanding without needing words. The child grew with their guidance, learning the ways of life, land, and care. Days passed. Slowly, every action carried meaning, every moment an opportunity to nurture and teach. He watched the child and understood fully now what courage truly meant, to face responsibility with love, patience, and trust, to act with intention and presence, to create a life beyond oneself. The farm, the child, and the family continued together each day, building on the last life, thriving quietly yet powerfully, hope living in soil, water, and breath. In youth, for the first time in years, that the world was wide, life was full, and love could grow. Steadily, the cycle of life continued, and nothing would ever be the same. Time moved gently across the farm. The seasons shifted with quiet precision. The child grew stronger and more curious. Each day, every morning, brought small discoveries and moments of wonder. The woman guided with patient hands and steady voice. He learned alongside her not only about caring for the child, but about the rhythms of life that intertwined with the land. Farm was alive in new ways, soil rich from careful tending, animals healthy, and calm crops growing with promise. The land seemed to hum softly under their attention. Every day carried lessons, sometimes in words, sometimes in silence, sometimes in shared glances or quiet gestures. The child began to explore more independently, walking through fields and gardens, curious about leaves, water, and insects, their laughter echoing softly through the open space. He watched the child with careful attention, without overstepping, allowing freedom while teaching boundaries. The woman shared traditions from her community, simple practices for life, and care stories of courage, patience, and endurance. He absorbed each lesson, let it shape how he approached the land, the child, and the world around him. Evenings were quiet and reflective. They often sat together on the porch, though, child resting between them, listening to the wind and the soft calls of animals. He realized how much he had changed. Solitude and isolation had once defined him, now presence, trust, and responsibility shaped every action. The woman observed him, noticing the subtle changes, the way he moved, spoke, and thought, the care he brought to every interaction. She shared more of her own life experiences of loss and hope, lessons learned through hardship and perseverance. He listened without judgment and understanding that these stories held wisdom beyond words. They worked together in the fields, maintaining fences, caring for crops, guiding the child, Every task carried intentionality action, a form of teaching and nurturing. The child learned quickly, observing gestures, listening to words, absorbing patterns of care. They celebrated milestones quietly, first words, first steps, small victories, and learning moments that carried profound meaning. The farm became a classroom for life, not in formal ways but through presence, observation, and engagement. Neighbors began to notice the quiet growth of the family. Curiosity and respect mingled in their observations. Some approached, offering help. Others watched from afar, no longer felt the weight of judgment. The responsibility they carried was private, sacred, and profound. One afternoon, the child discovered the river running, splashing, exploring. The woman guided with gentle words. He watched, feeling awe and admiration for her skill and patience. They walked together, the child between them, exploring the land. Every moment became a lesson in trust, observation, and care. Days continued to pass, each filled with work, learning, and reflection. The child grew more confident and independent, their laughter and curiosity bringing joy to the farm. The woman spoke of her elders and traditions, stories of courage, endurance, and wisdom, lessons that carried meaning and purpose. He shared his own experiences, hardships endured, knowledge gained, and lessons learned. Together, they built a life that was intentional, thoughtful, and nurturing, every action shaping the child, the land, and themselves. The seasons continued to turn. Rain nourished the soil, sunlight warmed, the earth animals thrived, and the child explored with wonder. He felt a profound sense of belonging, a connection to life, land, and family that he had never experienced before. Evenings brought reflection and gratitude. Sitting on the porch, watching the stars, listening to the soft sounds of life, the child began to understand responsibility and imitating gestures, absorbing lessons. Learning through observation, he marveled at the subtle ways life had shifted the once lonely farm, now full of love, care, and growth. The woman guided with wisdom and patience, her presence steady, strong, and nurturing. They continued to prepare the child for the world, teaching respect, understanding, and connections. Small victories became celebrations of life. The child learning to care for animals, tend plants, and observe the rhythms of the farm. The man observed, quietly guiding without imposing. The child to learn through experience and trust. Days grew warmer, longer, filled with sunlight and growth. The farm flourished under their attention and care. Their child began to speak in small sentences, sharing observations and stories, learning the language of life around them. The woman guided gently, correcting and encouraging without force. He learned alongside the child patience, observation, care, and understanding deepening within him. The farm became a sanctuary, a place of learning, nurturing, and presence. They celebrated small achievements together, milestones in growth, learning, and understanding. The seasons shifted once more. The child grew confident and strong. Farm thrived under careful stewardship. They walked together often, observing, guiding, teaching, and nurturing. Every day a lesson in life, responsibility, and care. He realized the depth of his transformation, from solitude and quiet despair to presence, trust, and responsibility. The woman observed him, noticing his growth and understanding her. Respect and trust deepened. They spoke little of the world outside. It was irrelevant. The farm, the land, the child, their shared presence were enough. The child learned to care for the land, to observe the rhythms of nature, to respect animals, plants, and the earth. He felt gratitude for the life they had built, the trust placed in him, the growth, love, and presence surrounding him. The woman continued to teach lessons of patience, endurance, and understanding, stories of courage and life. He listened, absorbed, and reflected, letting each lesson shape his actions and thoughts. The child grew more independent, learning, exploring, and observing every moment, a lesson in care and presence. Evenings were calm and reflective. They watched the stars, listened to the wind, and shared quiet moments. He marveled at the life they had nurtured, a family built on trust, care, and presence. The farm thrived under their attention, crops abundant, animals healthy, soil rich and fertile. They continued to guide the child, teaching life, care, responsibility, and connection. Days passed with work, reflection. In presence, each action shaping the farm, the child, and themselves. The seasons continued drain, sun, wind, and snow nurturing the land, the child learning the rhythm of life. He felt a sense of completeness. He had never known solitude replaced by connection. Responsibility and presence, the woman observed, guided, and nurtured her wisdom and patience, shaping every action. They celebrated small victories, quietly every moment carrying profound meaning. The child grew confident and capable, learning to care, observe, and respect. The farm became a living classroom, every day a lesson in life, care. In presence, he realized the depth of his journey from solitude to connection, from fear to trust, from loss to hope. The land, the child, and their family became intertwined, life thriving in quiet, steady, and profound ways. They walked together through fields, gardens, and orchards, every moment a lesson, every action a form of care. The child began to understand responsibility, learning through observation, experience, and gentle guidance. He marveled at the transformation, the farm alive, the family connected, the land nurtured. They continued each day with purpose, guiding, teaching, nurturing, and observing. Of nicknings brought reflection, gratitude, and quiet presence sitting together, the child resting between them. The wind and stars around the woman shared wisdom and tradition, stories of life, courage, and care. He listened, absorbed, and acted, every gesture intentional. Every thought reflected. The child learned and grew, understanding care, observation, and connection. The farm thrived, life moving in rhythm, harmony, and balance. They continued to guide each other, learning, teaching, and nurturing together. Days, weeks, and months passed. The farm, the child, and the family thriving. He felt profound gratitude for trust, life, and presence, for growth, care, and love. They celebrated small milestones, every moment carrying meaning. The child became capable, curious, and aware, learning the rhythms of life and land. The farm was alive and nurturing soil. Animals, crops, and people in harmony. Evenings were reflective. They sat together quietly, listening, observing, and appreciating life. He understood the depth of transformation, life returning, hope flourishing, love growing steadily and quietly. The woman guided, taught, and nurtured, every action intentional, every word meaningful. The child thrived, learning, observing, and growing with care. The farm became a sanctuary of life, a place of presence, trust, responsibility, and growth. Each day carried lessons, every action shaping the future, every moment significant. He marveled at the life they had created, trust, courage, care, and love intertwining. The seasons continued to shift, the child growing, learning, and understanding, the farm responding to care and attention. They walked together, often observing, teaching, guiding. In nurturing, he realized fully the depth of change, solitude replaced with presence, responsibility. In love, the woman observed and guided, her wisdom shaping every action and thought. Child learned to care for life and land, to respect, observe, and understand. The farm thrived, every element alive with attention, and caravanings brought reflection, presence, gratitude, and understanding. They continued daily work, teaching, observing, nurturing, and caring. Life on the farm was full connection, growth, and trust intertwining. He marveled at the transformation, the farm alive, the child thriving. The family connected, the woman guided with wisdom and patience, every action intentional, every gesture meaningful. The child grew stronger, curious, and aware, learning through observation and gentle guidance. The farm became a space of life, learning, and growth. Days passed with quiet purpose, furry action shaping land, child, and family. He felt profound gratitude for trust, care, life, and love. The family thrived, the farm responded to their attention. The child grew with understanding and care, of a moment carried meaning. Every action shaped the future. He realized life could return after solitude, hope could flourish, quietly love could grow, steadily and powerfully. And so they continued living, learning, guiding, nurturing, and carrying, the farm alive with presence, growth, and life.